därför att vi har en av konferensens höjdpunkter kvar på programmet. Och det är ju konferensens avrundning och summering och så som ska göras ut av Ulf Peter Hallberg. Ulf Peter Hallberg är en främmande fågel kan man väl säga, för att använda en liten kliché i det svenska litteraturlandskapet. Han är det inte bara därför att han är bosatt sedan många år tillbaka i Berlin och arbetar sedan en del år i varje fall tillbaka med creative writing i Paris på Sorbonne-universitetet. Och så reser han dessutom ständigt kors och tvärs över den europeiska kontinenten, ibland med avstickare till USA. Man vet liksom aldrig riktigt var Peter befinner sig i världen. Och ibland är han här faktiskt i Lund och hälsar på. Och ofta är han någon annanstans. Han är osvensk också därför att han förmodligen, vågar jag påstå, är mer känd utomlands än vad han är i Sverige. Och det är någonting som man får en klar bild av när man ser i den här boken som jag inte har kommit ihåg att ta med mig upp hit, utan som jag får gå och hämta nu. Som ligger här. En stor bok, en antologi. Som heter Ensamhetens strategier. Som kom ut i våras. Och som Peter introducerade faktiskt här i Lund, i Kleopska bokhandeln. Och det är en bok som handlar om Ulf Peter Hallberg och hans författarskap. Och där det då finns en lång rad bidrag, bland annat av Peter själv, men också av utländska författare, akademiker, kritiker och så. Och de som är intresserade av Peters författarskap bör naturligtvis läsa den här boken. För här finns det väldigt många intressanta artiklar och så om allt möjligt, men framförallt om Peter och hans gärning. Och där får man helt klart den uppfattningen om honom att han är en av Sveriges nu levande främsta författare. Så betraktas faktiskt Peter utomlands av utländska skandinavister, och med all rätt skulle jag vilja säga. Han är kanske också osvensk i så bemärkelse att det är svårt att kategorisera hans texter, hans skrivande. Han har ju skrivit skönlitterära verk. Som jag omedelbart kommer att tänka på nu, det är en roman med dokumentära inslag om Strindbergs period i Köpenhamn som heter Strindbergs skugga i Nordens Paris till exempel. Men han är väl främst känd alltså för sina essäböcker. Han slog igenom med en essäsamling som heter Flanörens blick för länge sedan, någon gång på 80-talet kanske eller så. Och därefter har han skrivit ytterligare essäböcker. Europeiskt skräp till exempel, som utmärkt bok, Grand Tour tror jag också det finns det som heter. Och så är han ju dessutom översättare. Och det är verkligen någonting som jag vill understryka här också i presentationen, att hans gärning som översättare är magnifik. Han har översatt framförallt dramatiska verk, Shakespeare från engelska, Molière från franska, Brecht till exempel från tyska, och inte minst Walter Benjamins Passagenverk i dess helhet. Och det har han ju också fått mycket beröm för. Så han har alltså många strängar på sin lyra, och nu är vi så lyckliga att han här ska försöka sammanfatta och avrunda den här konferensen. Han ska göra det på engelska också tror jag. Och det tycker jag är passande på ett vis. Det här är ju trots allt en internationell konferens, så det bör vi understryka. Varsågod Peter.
Tack Peter. I've heard that comedians, they warm up, so I thought why not? This is not part of the act, or it is. It will soon become part of the act. Because as I sort of called my paper, What's So Funny? Nordic Spleen versus Cosmopolitan Laughter. I thought that the warm-up would be to quote some graffitis from some of the cities that I really love. And give myself a chance to get into the kind of stand-up comedian that you probably hope for. If America is the melting pot, then the Indians were boiled alive. Artificial intelligence is no match for natural stupidity. If Batman is so smart, why does he wear his underpants outside his trousers? My boss is a self-made man and worships his creator. This has been found on city walls. I want to start by thanking the organizers for inviting me as a kind of unqualified Sherlock trying to detect who is trying to murder laughter and who might protect wit and humor from getting killed and torn apart by the not-so-witty gang led by big bad beefy killer popsy populism. I have so much enjoyed the energy of this conference. The generosity, the new perspectives. Why do I then, in my privileged situation of learning, have to bring up Nordic Spleen? Well, let's face it. I'm not a big philosopher like Simon Critchley or Michel Foucault. I'm interested in time. And I have some knowledge of Shakespeare's comedies, of his timing. So my philosophical statement for this conference is, laughter does not come first. There is a lot before someone actually laughs. Tons of things to analyze, as you know. Having been to this conference, I feel I'm on the spur of something. As you professors and scholars know, I'm already late with my short presentation of what I'm supposed to offer. The academic preface on what I'm about to do, what my research the last 4 days has been about, and what it will be devoted to during the next years. I've formulated my line of research to 5 questions. 1. Could it be that there is cold and warm humor? 2. Could it be that philosophy is unable to detect this difference, being left alone with its Begrifflichkeit, its proper philosophical language? 3. Could it be that the only one who can expose and celebrate the warm humor is the storyteller? 4. Could it be that Massimo Giuravolo's question to Simon Critchley was the peak of the many interesting questions during this conference? But he posed a question about the storyteller and about translation. 5. Could it be that I will be able to answer on statements 1 and 5 using digressions instead of PowerPoint? I hope so. Okay. I have to confess that I'm a big fan of Jerry Seinfeld, who would have said, "Oh, relax, Peter," and his remark, quote, "I love hearing a laugh that never existed in the world before." That has happened to me all through my life, like in the Beatles song, "In My Life." There are places I remember. Well, it's through my romantic belief in big cities, where you're anonymous, helpless, you belong to no one, not even to yourself, but you're open. So you listen, on the pavements, in the cafes and restaurants, even in the gutter if that's where you end up. So I've heard more jokes in big cities than in rural places. Is this philosophy? I hope so. Speaking about digressions, there is a paradox. Like you deep scholars all know, Rousseau taught that language definitely started its career around the world in Lapland. Because of the despairingly cold situation of the Lapps up there when they popped out of the ice before they were called Sami. This was at the time of the Great Breakthrough. the ice melting epoch, some millions of years ago. They had to get some kind of sounds out of their mouth, the people up there. They felt it. They acknowledged that if not, they would be lost. And we would not be here. That was it. We owe them one. They were desperate spleen Nordics. They were the first Seinfelds. But they didn't say, quote, "The real problem of stand-up, of course, is that you must constantly justify why you are the only one talking, while a room full of people sit quietly." Well, just like Simon Critchley, I share his love for Lawrence Stern and his master humor novel Tristram Shandy, giving us the paradigm of humor from the storyteller's point of view, the beauty and wit of digression. Simon already made us aware of a quotation that I felt is that I'm especially fond of. Quote, for in this long digression, which I was accidentally led into, as in all my digressions, only one only accepted, there is a master stroke of digressive skill, the merit of which has all along, I fear, been overlooked by my reader. Not for want of penetration in him, but because 'tis has an excellence seldom looked for, or expected indeed in a digression, and that I fly away from that. Out and about, as far and as often as any writer in Great Britain, yet I constantly take care to order affairs so that my main business does not stand still in my absence. Unquote. This was Richard was referring to about my hopping around. The quotation proves to be true, as you may well have understood about me. Rousseau's thinking about language was in fact a forerunner to another Beatles song, Help. Help. You know, I need somebody, help. Just anybody, help. Help, the song, puts us in the situation of the person trying to crack a joke. It starts with despair, often with how boring things are getting. The same words coming out of the same mouths all the time, things that have been told a million times being told again and again to joyous laughter. Populism that has become so popular. I can't understand it. Populism bores the hell out of me. But it has even grabbed hold on satire. They have one object of hatred in their cold satire. It is us in this room. People trying to understand something. Our lives, our humor, we search and research it. But they don't want us to. The Swedish poet Esaias Tegnér did not like the populism of his day, so he wrote his beautiful poem Mjältsjukan, The Illness of the Spleen. Because he hated small talk and puffy nobodies. He preferred intelligence and skillful poetry, often based on bad fluids of blood, etc., and which I therefore, in my puerile desperation, learnt by heart at the age of 15. The poem Mjältsjukan is a sensational Nordic spleen confession about the black sides of life, the opposite of Monty Python. Tegnér, down at Lund, probably sang, "Always look on the dark side of life." Already in its opening, Mjältsjukan states, "Jag stod på höjden av min levnadsbranter, där vattendragen delar sig och går. Med skummigt böljar hän åt skilda kanter. Klart var där uppe, där var skönt att stå. Då steg en mjältsjuk svartalf upp och plötsligt den svarte bet sig den lede vid mitt hjärta fast. This is the Nordic spleen. The starting point of every borealist joke and Nordic humor in general. I'm saying that the ice and the cold probably was the starting point of wit and laughter. Like Simon Critchley pointed out, it's all incongruous. He's right. It's a bit like when he, at the end of his conference, before taking the questions, said, quote, I quote, "Sorry, Richard, but I have to visit my grandmother," unquote. He taught us something about wit that very moment, when he had to go to a special place outside of the philosophical language. He took us by surprise. It was about shock. Is that guy insane? Suddenly visiting his grandmother with all of us waiting here at a huge CSS conference, wanting to ask profound questions? And then we found out he had to go to a special place. It was the Lund. Ha, that's funny. A lot also from the perspective that the philosopher actually is a human being, and not so much a Heidegger in his hut. Well, when he came back, smiling at his own joke, which is not allowed, neither by Hegel, Schopenhauer or Nietzsche. Heidegger was uncertain. He wrote, "Was macht das Lachen mit dem Mann?" No, mit das Mann. Heidegger's language also goes outside grammar. Well, Simon could also have been taught a lesson by us. If we, instead of welcoming him back, like Nordic Spleen personalities do, friendly professors, even weird writers like me, feeling we're safe again in our Swedish myspys culture, but we could have given him the cosmopolitan joke, just when he was about to speak. "Hey, Simon, how was your grandmother?" Just to point out the complexities of the cosmopolitan wit that learns from whatever is said before. Okay, if you're taking notes, laughter does not come at the start. Wit learns from what is said before, but wit also goes along with what was said. Deconstructs, tears apart, overemphasizes, digresses. I just want to point out that the cracking of a joke is not a singular event. It is a lifestyle, which in its appearances clearly shows us the difference between cold and warm humor, which I shall be happy to expose after I have summarized what I learned at the conference. So here is now part 2 of my thesis. I've named it The Conference, Survival Wit Kit. I have a motto. It's from my dear friend J.K. Chesterton, who dedicated most of his books to me, especially the marvelous study on Charles Dickens. Chesterton wrote, "Wit is reason on its judgment seat, and though the offender may be touched lightly, the point is that the judge is touched not at all. But humor always has in it some idea of the humorist himself being at a disadvantage and caught in." This is important. The entanglements and contradictions of human life. Now I struck gold. The elements of humor. That could be my dissertation. I bring up this quotation for 2 reasons. One is that what it emphasizes is that no philosophical language will be able to conquer, or other than on the surface, contain what's at stake in the joke, in humor. Only people like Molière and Shakespeare can make us laugh. All the laughs that Seinfeld and I want to hear. The laughs of the soul and the laughs from the heart. Even Patricia Keith-Spiegel in her study, Handbook of Humor Research, has to confess, I quote, the terminology situation in the area of humor remains perplexing." Unquote. When Thomas Mann reflects on Goethe, he has to admit that the brilliant Goethe failed on one thing. Thomas Mann's statement goes like this, I quote, "It is questionable whether Goethe belongs to the greatest writers, the geniuses of the great harvest like Molière and Shakespeare. Perhaps he was too learned for that," unquote. Isn't that fun? Is fun? The same goes for many of the translators of Shakespeare and Molière. They knew Greek and Latin, but they didn't get the jokes. They were too learned, suffering from lack of life. And if they detected something that for them looked like a joke, they didn't know how to tell it in their language. So the joke in itself, this is my strongest argument, might be dependent on two of my favorite big cities, London and Paris, and on storytelling and translation. It's about my category, the Cosmopolitan Laughter. You have to be a spelunker, visiting all sorts of places in big cities, falling into traps, being beaten up, fooled, but also like Tristram Shandy, getting to know a lot of interesting people. You have to live. Then you start understanding jokes, even telling them yourself. They're about life, being congruous, critically, the entanglements and contradictions in human life. Chesterton via Hallberg. Shakespeare was influenced of the Italian learned comedy, commedia erudita, but also by the more popular commedia dell'arte, where we meet the Pantalone, the old man, the juggler and the doctor in so many different characters. The comedies are mainly about the mistakes and errors of life, clearly penetrating the depth of how someone in the human race is reacting to difficult situations. There's often a king, an count, and a governor, some character who is overlooking everything, punishing, governing. With Shakespeare, it's someone who is also a bit of a mess. He has a lot of faults. He tries to solve conflicts, but he often can't. He tries reconciliation, but sometimes he's too late. All the comedies are based on execution, punishment, curses, and rejection of love, friendship, and loyalty. It's about love. It's about life. But what is it we learn from Shakespeare through his jokes and the skill of his words? In my Swedish edition, in the foreword, I wrote, language as a muscle and a heart that beats. A pair of eyes, rainy eyes, looking at us with friendliness and insight. Shakespeare. My good old French friend, the actor and theatre director Louis Jouvet, born in 1887, dead in 1951, once said that if you love Molière, that is, if you really love him, sincerely, then it means that you are protected against many faults and wrongdoings and degenerations of the soul. To love Molière means to want to go against hypocrisy, fanatic belief and bans. If you love Molière, it will be harder to be a political fanatic, and you will understand that even death can be funny in the right context. Molière's L'amour médecin, Dr. Cupid, was presented for the first time in 1665. It's only a sketch. Molière only had 5 days to write it. One more day than I had for this paper. It's about Sganarelle, who is blind to his daughter's love life. Lucien is the daughter who is in love with Clitandre. Lisette is a maid who acts as her advisor. She's not afraid to talk back to her master Sganarelle or to show his disdain for doctors. The doctors, like in his other play, are all based upon real-life doctors who lived during the 17th century. All are the same in the fact that they always try to save face. Dr. Thomas comes in and asks Lisette how things are with her friends, who has been sick. Lisette, he's dead. Dr. Thomas, dead? That's not possible. He said, well, I don't know if it's possible or not, but he is dead. Dr. Thomas, and I can tell you one thing, he can't be dead. He said, and I can tell you one thing, he's both dead and buried. Dr. Thomas, you are wrong. He said, I've seen it myself. Dr. Thomas, it's impossible. Hippocrates says that that kind of illness terminates the earliest on the 14th or the 21st day, and your friend has only been ill for 6 days. Pause. If there are any other lovers of Monty Python and me here, you might recognize a great sketch of theirs. The scene is a pet shop in London. So Molière has traveled through centuries to get into this sketch, beautifully written by John Cleese and Graham Parker. John Cleese comes in and says, with a parrot in his hand, and he says, "Hello, I wish to register a complaint, mister." The shop owner, he doesn't look at all. So Cleese goes again, "Hello, miss." "What do you mean, miss?" "Oh, sorry, I have a cold. I wish to make a complaint." "Oh, sorry, we're closing for lunch." "Never mind that, my lad. I wish to complain about this part. What I purchased, not this parrot, what I purchased not more than half an hour ago from this very boutique." "Oh yes, the Norwegian blue. What's wrong with it?" "I'll tell you what's wrong with it, my lad. It's dead." "No, no. It's resting. Look, my lad, I know a dead parrot when I see one, and I'm looking at one right now. It is resting." "Okay, if it's resting, I will wake it up. Hello, Polly, winky, winky, bangs it on the desk, throws it until it drops on the floor, and then John Cleese says, "Well, that's what I call a dead parrot." No, he's stunned. You stunned him just as he was waking up. No, 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 I've had enough of this. That parrot is definitely deceased. It's pining. It's not pining, it's passed on. This parrot is no more. It's expired and gone to see its maker. This is an ex-parrot. Molière to Monty Python. Cosmopolitan Laughter. Already at the opening of this great conference, I learned a lot from Anders Mortensson. He also warned me in a way by pointing out that the effect of observing humor might turn humor into a dead parrot. He did not use the words dead parrot. He's much more skilled. He used words like humanities and quantum physics, things that I know little about. And then he almost laid out a red carpet for Massimo Ciaravolo by saying that humor is an endlessly complex phenomenon, which also shows in the fact that it's so hard to translate. He did not point to Shakespeare and Molière, that's why I did. Allah. Then Massimo Ciaravolo, the first speaker here on humor in the world, shows with a minutious reading of Simon Critchley, combined with a close reading of the Swedish writer Hjalmar Bergman's Märklighet in Norrköping, that also in small towns there can be cosmopolitan humor. Thus he gave us hope. Let us reflect on the paper of my dear friend and life companion Massimo Ciaravolo from the University of Venice. Look out, digression. From him, I have always, long before this conference started in 2001, learned how sharp the foreign gaze on us Nordic writers can be. I've been extremely impressed as a writer how intelligent and clever professors of Scandinavian languages from other countries are. I met them in Italy, Lithuania, Serbia, France, and the US. How much they read and detect. How they love Pippi and Tjorven even more than I do. There is a sacredness about their work that should be shown at Riksdagshuset in Stockholm on Election Day in September this year. Because we are in a deep cultural crisis here in Sweden. Pick up the papers and throw them away. We have too few Massimos. Instead, we have politicians with no culture and no belief in culture. What they could learn from you Scandinavian studies professors from other countries is that Swedish culture can be a way of life, a task, and a commitment of the heart, far away from Sweden and its focus on newspapers. It has to be reintroduced in our country. Was that a circular argument or a coming home from abroad feeling? Okay, I'm naming the section that follows the Holy Papers. Through his analysis of the storyteller's voice in Bergman's Märklighet in Norrköping, Massimo Ciaravolo made us understand that in storytelling there is the possibility to avoid cold humor, which is the easy one. Finding a target and boom, The liberation, revelation, and elevation of the storyteller's voice can actually use the incongruous to be true to the entanglements and contradictions in human life. The storyteller in Bergman's novel hates his small town, but he loves it too. Language can conquer both perspectives in one voice. We're above satire, we're close to life. Hjalmar Bergman's storyteller includes voices from the small town he sort of despises and sees the problem of, but he does not do it just to ridicule. There is an element of surrealization of the real. It's also about him. The storyteller comes close to the rights and functions of the small town, but he does not look down at it from above. He's still part of it. No matter how many bars he's been to in cosmopolitan places like Berlin and Hollywood, which Hjalmar Bergman visited. Bergman is good at humor because he was so caught up in Nordic Spleen. He died in Berlin in 1931 through an overdose of morphine and alcohol. Massimo's final point was about translation. How the fact that there are good translators that can shape also the jokes and the black or red warm humor in books like Marco Welsing Wordshopping into their own languages and make them work, thereby leaving all realms of Neue Witze and national pejorative jokes for the cosmopolitan humor of the soul, as sacred as the children's prayer. Anna Hultmann, in her paper, brought us a brilliant analysis of the storyteller's playful humor in Carl-Henning Wikmark's Jägarna på Karinhall from 1972. Wikmark's story is about a long-distance runner who ends up at Hermann Göring's Chateau Karinhall after the German Olympics in 1936. Wikmark uses the ambivalence of language, portraying characters like Göring or Hilmer with their own Nazi jargon, sometimes using a language inspired by Albert Friedenthals' Das Weibchenleben der Völker and books like that, and other pre-Germanic, pre-Nazi tales. And it deals with a lot of sexual stuff that I will not go into, but can only recommend. Wikmark's novel was damned by the Swedish critics in 1972, and it was refreshing to listen to Anna Hultmann's clever exposure of the skills of the storyteller's approach, a way of showing ambivalence, thus pulling the reader into a domain of questions and problems, mostly very disturbing ones, without conclusions or ways out. Hultmann also pointed out how this disturbing novel about the worst epoch we've had so far, 1933 to 45, gets its intensity through the humor, which in a way like in Hans Christian Andersen's tale shows us that the king is naked. Els Joxi Bisomans taught me how one of the first Swedish parodies, Skämt om Abborta, had an excellent subversive undertone with lots of exaggerations. Lorenzo Lozzi Gallo presented a wonderful panorama of Icelandic nicknames attached to people in order to make fun of them and ridicule them. This is why William the Conqueror fought as well as he had to avoid his first nickname, William the Bastard. We can learn from this and ask all people on earth who work for the media to call Putin, who at the start wants to be Putin the Conqueror, that they must rename him Putin the Ugly or Putin the Evil. Clemens Rettel investigated Johan Heiber's What Will Kong Salomon or Johan Hattemeyer that premiered at the Royal Danish Theatre in Copenhagen in 1825. Already before the opening night, protesters required publicly to cancel the production. They feared that such a comic undertaking would damage the national institution. Rettel's paper was an entertaining analysis of Heiberg's strategical interplay between new text and well-known music, like Der Freischuss. Carmen Viorine reflected on Hedwig Elisabeth Charlotte of Holstein's diaries, especially the ones from 1770 to 1780, and all its witty notations about the playful scenes and divertissements that were to become so popular at the court of Gustav III, Kalman really pointed out how improvisations connected to a place, a room in the castle, a garden, would lead people to acknowledge new aspects of themselves. The divertissements were about searching for identity, also through the jokes. I'm so sorry I cannot mention you all, and that I could not attend all papers. This had to be fresh out of the oven. The papers were holy, each one of them, I'm sure. And also the singing, like last night at the Hypothesis. But also how Colin Leven sang as an overview from over 100 years of Icelandic art song. Compositions that hold universal appeal, such as purposefully silly material combined with punchlines. Interesting for my argument also that the Icelanders, who really are cosmopolitans, had their greatest inspiration from the art scene of New York jazz. The wonderful trip to Copenhagen gave us tremendous insights in the hard stuff we are surrounded by. From extremists' point of view, Dennis Mayhoff-Spring's performance was a great struggle with technique at first, that he through patience and courage could overcome. To show us some marvelous examples of satire, the most compelling and perhaps harsh one still so effective, the picture of Salman Rushdie, published in Charlie Hebdo, with Rushdie walking on a pavement, covered by bandages and knittings, also on his whole face with the text, Salman Rushdie va mieux, il se promène enfin incognito. Salman Rushdie is better, at last he can walk the streets incognito. I have to stop here because of the time problem, and my belief in timing. No more digressions. I could not listen to everything because at some point a writer has to write. He should always know that his task is to be a storyteller. And my favorite perspective in history stems from my beloved friend Walter Benjamin, who in the Arcades project made an annotation, an important remark. Benjamin wrote, Jede Kindheit leistet etwas Unersetzliches für die Menschheit. Varje barndom uträttar något oersättligt för mänskligheten. Every childhood does something irreplaceable for mankind. It's about creating new hope. Just look at them. Each new generation of children, how playful they are, like Hedvig Elisabeth Charlotta singing at their best, like Colin Levin singing in full tones, like Anders Mårtensson being a combination of earnestness, well-grounded statements and humor, like Richard Schönström with his generosity, like Magdalena with her ability to be helpful and gay at the same time, and all the others that have been helping us get so much amusement. To you, I wish to direct our deepest thanks. We will laugh more now, I'm sure. The parrot of culture is not dead. It's only resting. It's a Norwegian blue. This parrot will overcome the crime novels, cold humor, brutal killings, and the cliché of the Nordic, which is structured on selling itself to people who are interested mainly in the failures of others, and want to claim that the Scandinavians failed too, that our struggle for righteousness and courage was in vain, and that every Swedish man has a brothel in his cellar where prostitutes from everywhere are chained. Full stop. I don't think anyone has been murdered in Fjällbacka, Camilla Läckberg's little beautiful crime village. I think there are too many killings in a lot of Swedish small places at the moment, in books that are shipped abroad. Instead, you have accomplished something great. We have now enjoyed the warm humor of the storyteller, the analysis of the philosopher. We have had wonderful people presenting humanistic fields of interest, presented as big news, mind-blowing stuff. And through this we will not only save and worship Lund, we will go on Humour, in a way, is the only field that can save the holy, the unspeakable. It makes it possible for someone to tell a joke, like a story about the incongruous and the entanglements and contradictions of human life. And that is what the children teach us, with no spleen, just cosmopolitan laughter. We look at them. What's so funny? Everything. Thank you.